Freedom itself was attacked this morning, and freedom will be defended. The United States will hunt down and punish those responsible.
20 years on from the attacks of 9/11, people prepare to reflect and remember those they lost. As we mark the 20th anniversary of the terror attacks on New York and Washington that killed nearly 3,000 people. Attacks that have forever been known by the date on which they happened, 9/11. Commemorations will be taking place in Manhattan and across the United States to remember all those killed and injured. Our North America editor John Sopel has been hearing the stories of 3 people impacted by the horror of September the 11th, and a warning: his report does include footage of the attack on the Twin Towers.
The one thing that time hasn't dulled is just how profoundly shocking the sights and sounds were that Tuesday morning 2 decades ago. This terrorist attack changed the world. Nearly 3,000 people died, and thousands more had their lives upended. This is the story of 3 of those people who found themselves at the vortex of the storm.
My dad was an amazing human being.
Max Giacconi was a 10-year-old schoolboy when he was called to the principal's office. His father Joseph worked at the World Trade Center.
I went down the hallway and my mom was standing there with tears in her eyes, and she told me what had happened, and we had a moment in the hallway. I think I was just very confused at first. Like, you know, you're an innocent 10-year-old thinking like the world is great, and then you find out that someone killed your father.
Hundreds of miles south in Florida, Andy Card was also at an elementary school. The chief of staff to President Bush knew he had to interrupt him.
That's when I walked up to the president and I leaned down and I whispered to him, "A second plane hit the second tower. America is under attack."
Anne Van Hine was in her car when she heard the news, and she knew as people were trying to escape the Twin Towers, her firefighter husband Bruce would be heading in.
My kids went to bed. Emily and Megan were 17 and 14 at the time. And I stayed dressed. I laid down with them, but I didn't go to sleep because I figured somebody was coming to the house and I didn't want to be in my pajamas. It's weird, the things you worry about. And at about midnight, somebody came to the house to say that Bruce was unaccounted for.
This memorial, with great restraint, does justice to the terrible events of that day. But nothing can capture the sense of chaos, anger, disbelief of what was unfolding. Then there was steely resolve, and Americans were united, and most of the rest of the world stood with America. The Taliban in power in Afghanistan, who'd harboured the Al-Qaeda terrorists, would be driven from power, and the US would try to replace the warlords with democracy. But 20 years on, America has abandoned Afghanistan.
I think we're still the greatest democracy in the history of the world, but we are not shining the way we used to shine. And yes, we are tarnished. I do think that it has been a defeat for the pride of America and the respect that we have had around the world.
20 years ago, America was never more united. 2 decades on, and the terrorist threat largely quelled, and America has never been more divided.
The way we came together was awe-inspiring. And in 20 years, the pendulum has swung, in my opinion, the pendulum has swung the other way.
Every day I miss my dad, every single day, whether it's 9/11, whether it's January 13th, whether it's July 7th, I miss my dad, and that will never change.
And so to 2021, and the most powerful country in the world seems to be suffering a crisis of confidence, and in the manner of its departure from Afghanistan, the Kabul debacle, a crisis of competence. Just off the tip of Manhattan, Lady Liberty symbolises America opening its arms to the world. But 20 years on, the US feels a much more introspective place. John Sopel, BBC News, New York.
The 9/11 attacks led to the invasion of Afghanistan. 2 decades later, the Taliban are back in power and presenting a new face to the world. They've promised to forgive those who fought against them and to respect women's rights to work and education. But many Afghans are still fearful of what the new order will bring. 2 decades after the terror attacks on the United States on September 11, 2001, people across the United States and the world are preparing to mark the deadliest foreign attack ever on US soil, which killed nearly 3,000 people. It prompted President George W. Bush to declare a global war on terror. He zeroed in on al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden and the Taliban in Afghanistan. It was after a 20-year conflict in this country that the US announced its withdrawal this year of the last American troops.